I am very pleased to be joined now by former Illinois Senator Carol Moseley Braun. Thank you so much for being here. It is such a pleasure to have you here.
It's great to talk to you again. Thank you for having me.
I know I should have said something. Remember when Liz Taylor, before the pandemic, used to have those book dinners, and you were at one, and I was at the other end of the table, and by the time I worked my way down, you had already left for the night. So I'm really sorry we didn't get to say hello that night. But I thought that we needed to talk about your experience and what advice you have for Kamala Harris. I know that you did a big interview about this with Fran Spielman. It was wonderful. I would like for you to share some of that interview with me and my listeners. What do you think she needs to worry about?
Well, number one, I would hesitate to give her any advice because she's obviously gone further and mastered this process better than I ever did. So I don't know that I'm a person to give advice.
Oh, yes,
but
you are. You were the first black woman to serve in the U.S. Senate. You have great experience, and we could all benefit from it.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. I appreciate that very much. But I would just tell her, just stick to your guns. Be clear with the American people about what it is you'd like to do as president. Make commitments now. Because, frankly, if you don't, people start saying, she's just a pretty face. And that's, and she isn't. She is a pretty face, but she also has real substance to her. And I think that bringing out the substance will be the strong suit that she can play in what will be, no doubt, a very rigorous campaign.
One of the things that I've said to our audience, which is, of course, a very democratic crowd, and we're all behind her and we're all rooting for her. But I've said, August we may be having a lot of celebrations and a lot of joy, and I hope that will continue. But the Republicans are not going to be this quiet forever, and that come September and come October, when they realize everything's on the line, it's going to get ugly and it's going to get personal. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree. And you're right. We can't take anything for granted. It was a joyful convention. I was happy to be there. It was the nicest convention I think I've ever attended. But when the euphoria goes away, you have to remember that the only thing that really matters in this is how many votes you have on Election Day. And she's got to not only get the number of votes, but get them in the right places to win the Electoral College. And that's what matters, and that's what we should be focused laser-like on at this point, instead of just getting comfortable and saying, we got a great nominee, and we do have a great nominee, but the point is that we're going to have to work hard to get her elected president.
Were you attacked personally? Did you feel that there was racism and misogyny thrown your way?
Joan, you were there. You know what I went through.
Yeah.
It was pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't able to handle it. And that's why I said if she sticks with her guns and just stays what she knows, which is she knows government, and she can communicate that better than anybody right now, I think. And so if she sticks with that, I think she'll be fine. It doesn't serve a purpose really to go back to my experience, because it was a different world. It was different from the United States in those days, 20 years ago.
Well, it is and it isn't. I still think she's going to be facing a lot of racism and misogyny. I mean, we've made some strides, but really it's still there.
It is still there. And in fact, the French have a term for it, misogynoir. I don't know if you heard that.
No.
And that's a special brand of misogyny that black women have to face. And she's not just black; she's also Asian American also. And so, when you take all those different sets of stereotypes and you mix them up together, you've got a toxic brew that can really damage somebody's reputation. And I hope that she is able to avoid that. They are going to come with it. That's all they know to do. I mean, it's gotten silly and you're going to criticize somebody for the way they laugh, for their smile. And, how low can you go? So they're going to go as low as they can. And quite frankly, Michelle Obama's advice about when they go low, we go high, I don't think that's going to work in this election season. She's going to have to be able to meet every single allegation, every single thing that gets thrown at her. She's going to have to meet it, or her campaign will, and push back and say, this is the real Kamala Harris. And I think she can win.
Well, it seemed to me, listening to Michelle's speech, even Michelle Obama has backed away a little bit from that. When she was talking about how a lot of us face mountains and we're not going to get a gold-plated escalator to take us to the top.
Exactly.
She was... She didn't say Trump by name, but she certainly made a lot of references. And you know what? I think that's okay. I don't think that's not going low. That's not being mean. That's not attacking, Tim Walz' son, Gus, which I think is just beneath contempt. That's, I think, certainly within the realm of political discourse. Carol, one thing I was really surprised about, and I guess this falls in with what you're saying, but I'd like you to shed some insight here. When Donald Trump sat down with the National Association of Black Journalists here in Chicago,
I'm sorry.
And said that Kamala Harris used to be Indian, and she only recently turned black. And I'm thinking to myself, that's, first of all,
he's lost his mind.
If you said that maybe to the Heritage Foundation or CPAC, maybe they would give you a pass. But to say that at the NABJ, and I was really waiting to see what Kamala's reaction would be. And when she was asked about it, she was just like, you know what? Same old, same old. We've heard it before.
Right.
And I kind of admired that, but there was part of me that just wanted her to smack him down. And that's the part I have to get control over, right?
No, that's where we come in. We, meaning her supporters, people who like her candidacy and who want to see her elected president of the United States, need to weigh in and start pushing back on this kind of foolishness. I mean, they will go as low as they can manage, and it's going to be up to us to push back on it, to call it out for how silly and stupid it is, how weird it is.
Yeah.
But not the candidate. She's got to stay above reproach and above the fray and above the mud wrestling, and leave that to us.
Seriously, when you heard that, what went through your mind?
That he had lost his mind. Like, how do you not sit in front of a bunch of black journalists and say she just turned black? I mean, seriously.
Yeah. Well, at the DNC, I sat down with Cam Buckner, who, of course, is a state legislator, and I turned to him at one point and I said, Cam, have you always been black? And he burst out laughing. I mean, is that something I have to ask people now, Carol? Have you always been black?
Oh, listen. Actually, though, there's a funny story associated with that. When I was born, my birth certificate said white. It wasn't until Bill Kemner was nominated to be head of the State Department of Public Health that I was able to get it changed, and he changed it for me. He thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. But anyway.
Wow.
Yep. So my birth certificate this minute says amended 1983, and that was the amendment, changing from white to black.
Well, it's a good thing Donald Trump didn't know about you. He would have said, "Look at Carol Moseley Braun." Perfect example.
Well, you can call an idiot, and it's not going to sink into them, but it may resonate with somebody else, and that's the point. Is we got to speak to the American people, not just indulge him and his goofiness. He has a difficulty with the truth. Passing acquaintance with the truth, a difficult relationship with the truth, and so we just have to call it out wherever we hear it. And make sure that it doesn't go unsaid, because it is in that. It is going unsaid that the seeds of distrust get planted. And so I think that we have an obligation to stand up for her and to fight for her so that she does not have to get down into this pigsty with him.
Yeah. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are sitting down with Dana Bash from CNN tomorrow. What advice would you give her or them?
I just say just stick to your guns. Continue to tell the American people the truth. and tell them what you're going to do in office, what you want to do as president, and establish yourself as the premier candidate in this race. Most people don't pay a lot of attention to politics. I mean, some of us do, because that's who we are. But the fact is, most people don't pay a lot of attention, and they want to. And I think that speaking to them is the most important thing she can do. Speak to the American people about what it is you can do for them. It's not about you. It never is about you as an individual. It is always about the voters and what they need and what they want to see. And so I think if you speak to that, she'll be fine.
I know that it was not an easy time for you as the first African-American woman to be elected to the Senate, but it seems like now things, when it comes to interviews, that it's even worse. So many journalists wanting that viral moment, that clickbait, the gotcha kind of thing, the gotcha kind of question. Do you think that's just going to be a part of our political life from now on?
I do. And the fact of the matter is that the technology has moved faster than we've been able to keep up with it. The fact of the matter is that this generation has a different way of communicating than mine did. We relied on newspapers and radios and things like television, that sort of thing. But it's moved now to social media and the clickbait issue that you raised in a way that my grandparents wouldn't recognize. My parents wouldn't recognize. I barely recognize. That's all I can do to keep up with this stuff. But we have to keep up with it, because that's how young people communicate. And capturing the hearts and minds of young voters is going to be the real challenge for everybody's campaign going forward. So I think she has a great chance to be president, but it's going to require that she, like I say, stay clear about who she is, stay clear about her message to the American people, not let him get her off her game, which, of course, he's going to continue to try to do in every ridiculous way you can imagine. I mean, they've come at everything. I mean, it's not just Governor, the coach's son, but his daughter. You know, they even came after her. It's like, what are you going to? I mean, how low can you go? You're going to come after everybody's family. That's absurd right there. But if you're going to do that, are there no guardrails at all in the political discourse at this time? I think there has to be guardrails. There has to be some way that we can get back to civility, and that's our job, to make that happen.
I think that and maybe you're going to say this is a little Pollyanna, but I really think if Harris and Walz win, and if they win with enough of a margin of victory to really send a message, and if, in the most perfect world, we also have the Congress and the Senate, I think that it might just be the time for Republicans to try to turn a corner and be less crazy, be more sane, be less MAGA and more conservative, like in the old days. What do you think?
I agree with you, and I think that's apparently what Adam Kinzinger thinks too. I mean, he did a speech at the convention, and that was essentially him calling his party back to its roots. And it's okay. You know, conservative is one thing. You can have a conversation about conservatism. You can have a conversation. You can have a conversation about ideas and principles and policies. You cannot debate a cult. Mm-hmm. You know, and what we're dealing with is a cult here. And I just hope that this is just a passing moment, that we'll get past it with this election, and that Harris and Walz will become president and vice president of the United States. I'm hopeful. That's me being Pollyannish. It's my turn.
Okay. I'm talking to former U.S. Senator Carol Moseley Braun. We are going to take a break, and when we come back, when she was sitting down with Franz Spielman, she also talked about President Biden. We're going to talk about President Biden when we come right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am talking to our former Democratic Senator Carol Moseley Braun. She recently sat down with Franz Spielman and had a long conversation. And one of the things that they touched on was Joe Biden. You served in the Senate with Joe Biden. What was that like?
More than that, Joe Biden came to Chicago to talk me into going on the Judiciary Committee with him. And my joke, which he never found funny, he never laughed at this joke, okay? My joke was he just wanted Anita Hill on the other side of the table. And he still does not find that funny. Yeah, wait. But I decided I did go on the Judiciary Committee at his urging, and he convinced me that it was the right thing to do, and he was right in hindsight. But so I served on the committee for 6 years, and it was quite an experience. I mean, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad he talked me into it. I had been on the Judiciary Committee in the state legislature and decided I didn't want to do that ever again because it was stuff people never agree on and how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. All those kinds of things are not interesting. So I was like, okay, why would I do this to myself? I'm going to this new legislative body, to the United States Senate, and why would I want to go and do that after what we had just seen with Anita Hill? And I didn't want to do this, but he called me and came to Chicago. He came to Chicago and called me when he got here and said, can I come over and talk with you? And I said, of course, yes. And so we sat down over a cherry pie and coffee, and he proceeded to make his case why it was important for me to go on to judiciary. And he was right.
What did he say to you? What was the argument that drew you in?
The argument was about the substance of what it is the Judiciary Committee does. And he was very convincing and basically said that my voice would make a difference on that committee, probably more than just as a senator, that it was an important thing for me to do as the first and only, at that point, the only black person in the Senate, that it was important for my voice to be heard on the kinds of issues that the committee covered. And he was right. I mean, it turned out that it was because I was on the Judiciary Committee that I was able to engage on the whole Confederate flag debate. It was because I was on the Judiciary Committee that I was able to engage on issues having to do with everything from back to angels on a pin. I mean, I did settlements in terms of when people die, that sort of thing. So yeah, I did a lot of stuff on that committee, and it turned out to be a really valuable learning experience for me.
You mentioned teasing him about Anita Hill. That was, I mean, yes, it was a different time, but still, that was not one of Joe Biden's finest moments, and that is one thing that has dogged him since then.
That's correct, and rightly so. I mean, the whole Anita Hill thing was a real tragedy for our country. She was not believed, and we're still paying the price for it. Mm-hmm. I have to say, I like to say I was right about that. Because Clarence Thomas has turned out to be as bad a Supreme Court justice as we think in memory have had.
Worse.
Yeah, okay. You said it, I didn't. But I agree with you 100%. He's turned out to be terrible, and with ethical problems and everything else, just awful. And so I think that Joe Biden, again, he was very persuasive in talking to me about the specifics of what the Judiciary Committee does and why it was important for me to be on it. And I agreed with him, and I went on that committee, and I have never regretted it.
Yeah. Well, you got a lot of good stuff done. So there's, looking back, there isn't really much reason for regrets.
Nope.
And were you surprised when he finally stepped aside?
Actually, I was. I have said, which is true, I would follow Joe Biden to the gates of hell. Literally.
So
he's that kind of
this whole station, all of our listeners, we were riding with Biden.
Yep. Because he's such an ethical, such a good man. Unfortunately, the presidency is such a hard job. It's like taking years off his life. And unfortunately, he had to deal with that. And he was, I think, looking at very ugly poll numbers and decided that this was more than he could bear. And I don't blame him for that. You've got to stay alive, and you got to do what you need to do because your family, after God, your family comes, And so, and he made a decision that was in his own best interest, and I don't hold it against him at all.
Do you think that that Democrats should have waited? Do you think that Democrats should have scheduled another debate to see if that was just a stumble?
Well, his debate was terrible. But and they thought they had another one, actually one that Trump is trying to back out of right now. That was scheduled under Joe Biden, and so there was another scheduled, but Joe decided he was not going to go there. And that's his decision to make. He knows his health better than anybody does. He knows what his family has been through. He knows, he's got a personal bird's eye view of the rigors of that job. And it's a tough job. And he has slugged it out. He kept his campaign promises. He did what he said he was going to do. And now he's stepping aside. And he stepped aside for Kamala. And I could not be more pleased. She's wonderful. She's terrific. She's got all the equipment to be president. She, as a former prosecutor, I can relate to what she's been through. She's done an excellent job. I mean, I was a prosecutor too, but a civil prosecutor, which is very different. And it was a different time also. But she has done a yeoman's job as a prosecutor, and even as a senator. She has drilled down on a number of the nominees that have come before that committee. Happily, I didn't have anybody as extreme as she got with Kavanaugh and whatever. When I was in the Senate, I didn't have people like that. I had Ruth Bader Ginsburg and really people you want to just cuddle up to.
Yeah.
But she has shown her strife. She has shown her capacity, and I think we are all very blessed as Americans to have such a stellar woman standing for that office. And we'll break the glass ceiling and make history with her. I'm just so thrilled at the opportunity to work for her and to do everything I can for her, because I think our country will be moved forward, and that's going to be an important thing.
Yeah, and like I said, we were committed. We were, whatever Joe Biden needed, we were ready to do that. But the outpouring of excitement and energy that has erupted with Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, really, I'm so glad to see it, but it surprised me. Did it surprise you?
It did. I'm delighted that she's been embraced by the party that she has. I'll be honest with you, I was really kind of taken aback because I knew some of the people who were applauding her had been the very people stabbing her in the back, or stabbing Joe in the back. And so that part disturbed me a little bit. But the fact of the matter is, it all works out. It all worked out, and we wound up with a nominee that I think can do it and that can win this election.
And were you surprised when President Biden made his speech Monday night at the convention and he looked out at the crowd and he said, nobody is going to work harder for Harris and Walz than I am?
No, I wasn't surprised because that's who he is. He's a wonderful man. I mean, he really is. He's a great American. He always puts country first. And he, I think, is going to go down in history as one of our best presidents. He really followed through on everything he said he's going to do, from the pandemic to the recession to all the personalities that are going on right now. He's had one dictator after another to confront, and he's done it. So he did the foreign policy, the domestic policy. He's done it all. And so I just hope that he's able to go into the sunset happy with his own service to the country and happy with where he is personally.
Share with me and my listeners what you think we should be doing to help Kamala Harris get elected as our next president.
One, you got to register. You got to make sure you can vote. Let's start with that. Not just you, but the people in your family. You'd be surprised how many people close to you who you think of as rational, reasonable people are not registered and are not participating in this process. But that's what we're looking at, is a situation in which We have so many people. I mean, less than half, about half. I'm making up this number. I take it back, but I don't have numbers, and I don't have numbers in front of me. But we don't have full participation in these elections by eligible voters, and that's a real problem. So you probably know somebody who probably won't brag about it. They won't talk about it a lot because they're probably ashamed. But the fact of the matter is, find out who the people are in your life and in your world who are not registered to vote, and go and get them registered. Talk to them also in the process about who they're going to vote for. They may not want to vote for Kamala, but whoever they're going to vote for, they've got to be eligible to vote. That's step A, is getting people registered. Step B is to make the case for Kamala Harris as your nominee, as your candidate. I think that there's a good case to be made. And so if you go ahead and make it to the people in your life who you know and have feelings for, that will go a long way. That will go further, frankly, than all the TV ads and all the conversation at the grocery store will do. So I just think that step A. Step B is to talk about Kamala and why she will be a good president for all Americans. And step C is if there's somebody in your life who has a problem getting to the polls or doesn't know where their voting place is, find out what it is and talk to them about that. Your polling place is here. The school down the street. Your polling place is there. Whatever it is, you talk to them about the mechanics of voting so we can get a turnout that will look good for this nominee. I think she can win. If people come out and vote, we'll win.
Great advice from former Illinois Senator Carol Moseley Braun. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to talk with you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.